We attend incidents at height. We do water rescue.
Cat stuck in I'm sure you don't. Is cat stuck in trees? Is that a myth, or do you actually?
We do. We have to be fit or expect to be able to rescue our partner.
Welcome to Tom Talks Training. Today's guest is a firefighter and local legend, Claire Page. She's also an Iron Woman triathlete, keen on endurance training, mixes some strength in there, and we're going to be chatting to her about what it takes to get into the fire service from a fitness standpoint, what the physical demands of the jobs are, and hopefully get some insights and stories into everyday life as a firefighter. All right, so thanks for joining. First question, what does it take to get into the fire service? What kind of fitness tests do you have to do? Have you got any ideas?
So there's a few things you've got to do. You've got to do a ladder climb to check a very basic sort of no fear of heights.
Yeah, fairly standard.
You also have to do a static lift of a ladder. Our heaviest ladder is a 4-person lift. We need a crew of 4. So
what do you do with it?
It's literally sort of a simulated how you would demonstrate a good squat technique. So bending your legs straight back, and there's basically sort of simulated 2 handles, which would be the end of the ladder, and you just do a straight.
So like a deadlift, basically.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So it's not a real ladder. You have almost like a deadlift test.
So, yes. Yeah.
On a machine.
It is on a machine. Yes. Yeah. I think.
Right. Is it heavy? Have you tried it?
Yes, I have. Yes. Yeah. It's a fair test, I think.
Yeah.
It is a heavy weight, but I think if you're in the position initially to think, I'm interested in becoming a firefighter.
Yeah.
I think most people have a certain level of fitness. I think...
If you had to take a guess, the equivalent weight in kilos for a deadlift, what do you think?
I think it is about 30 kilograms.
Okay, so it'd be like doing a 30-kilo deadlift.
Yes, yeah.
That's just a guesstimate, don't worry. If that's not right, that's fine, yeah.
Well, I think that was something I think I did read.
You did look
so
that
I think that is about right.
All right, so that's pretty doable for anyone. If you've got a good technique, most people could do that.
Yes, exactly that. Yeah, it's the tests. There's nothing, I don't think, that's outrageous or that you would have to really work hard at specifically.
Do you have a cardiovascular test to get in, like a bleep test or anything like that?
We do. We call it a rural simulation test,
Okay.
which
Out in the country.
yes. Well, it is for exactly that.
What do
really.
you do?
So it's perhaps one of our physically demanding emergency call-outs would be exactly quite a rural scenario of taking a portable pump to the fire or to a water source, and therefore taking lengths of hose which are heavy and awkward to carry. Potentially, in the raw test, there's a casualty drag, so potentially, sort of rescuing.
So do you have a time limit? So you have to take these objects out to a rural location? And
we do.
Are you timed or?
So we would it's typically done under assessment on a drill yard, which is just sort of, I should imagine really just sort of a bigger car park almost, if you imagine. And we would set it up the distances. For example, you would have to drag a casualty dummy, which I think is 8 stone, about 55 kilograms, something like that.
A small woman on that.
Yes, exactly. Yes, yeah. You have to drag that 20 metres or so. Then you would put the casualty dummy down, take 2 lengths of hose back 20 metres, bring a short, smaller ladder back by yourself. So it's all just running back and forward, running out
objects.
Hose. Yes.
Sounds like farm strength, like farm strong.
Yes, but it is exactly that, really. Yes, and they try and make that particular test very job specific rather than a bleep test.
Yeah.
And that rural test we do in full fire kit. So you're wearing your fire leggings, your tunic, your gloves.
A tunic.
Yeah, we do call them tunic.
Like a Roman tunic. What? Am I getting that wrong? Isn't a tunic one of those white sheets you wear over
A toga. That's a toga.
What's a tunic? Like a dress thing?
Well, we do call them fire tunics, really. So just exactly if you picture a firefighter,
I just imagine you running around in a toga.
Now you've said about toga,
Okay, I don't know what a tunic is.
Well, so
like a dress, like a fireproof dress.
No, just basically like a jacket, but it's always called.
All right, we'll move on from tunic. You're wearing some fire clothes. You're wearing a lot of layers of fire
kit, yes,
okay,
yeah. And I always think, sort of to friends also to explain, I think it feels like wearing your ski kit.
Okay.
So it's thick. It's fair. I do think it's fairly cumbersome.
Do you get sweaty?
Yeah, very much so.
Hot?
Very much so. Yes.
Do you have any heat-specific training? Do you have to be able to cope with hot temperatures? You must have something.
We do, yes. And it's something that's being researched now much more. Heat stress is something we are really aware of.
Yeah, I imagine, because if you do regular saunas or steam rooms, you adapt to it where at first you feel like you're suffocating, it's like shortness of breath, but if you do it every day, you do get used to it. I can imagine that being useful for the fire service.
Yeah, very much so. And it's something I think instant commanders, so if you are in charge of an incident where there's a very hot...
I thought you said instant commanders. Did you say incident?
Incident
All right, I was like, that's an amazing job title. I'm the instant command. Okay, sorry. Incident commanders.
Sorry,
it's something
mumbling. So if you are, the incident commander, so in charge of that particular emergency situation, and I, for example, was that person sending 2 firefighters in to a hot compartment fire, it would be part of my training and professionalism really to think, well, when they come out, they've had a massive, intense heat stress situation. So it sounds very basic really, but we'd have a bucket of cold water to dip your hands in sort of over your wrists for it sort of an instant cool down. We take off our tunics, our fire jackets. So we take off our protective clothing. We take off our outer jacket as quickly as we can.
Basically just let them cool off.
Yes, exactly that. Yes, yeah.
Can you see firefighters maybe even like doing regular sauna or steam room to prepare himself for the job, or just no one taking it that extreme? Is that?
Well, that would be, I think, a really good idea. I think the only thing is our job now as a firefighter has become so varied that fires are really just a small part of what we do now. If we think of, we attend incidents at height, we do water rescue.
Cat stuck in I'm sure you don't. Is cat stuck in trees? Is that a myth, or do you actually?
We do.
Do you really take cats out of trees? Is that what our taxes are paying for? I say leave the cats in the trees.
Well,
cut the budget.
Yeah, we don't need that much council tax. We always say, because I think a lot of people really kindly, ask us about, gosh, do you go to cats up trees? And certainly, if we do school visits, children always ask us about cats stuck up trees. And I often try and reassure, I say, well, you never see a skeleton of a cat stuck up a tree. So they always make their way down.
I don't know if I should make that the podcast title. You never see a skeleton of a cat up a tree. Claire Page 2023.
I would
or
be
Cheshire Fire Service. I'm going to just put a Cheshire Fire Service official. You've thrown me off with that one.
Tunics and cats stuck up trees.
Do you ever have to retest your fitness?
Yes, we do. Yes, yeah.
How often?
We have a yearly basic treadmill test, which consists of, it's just walking actually on the treadmill at a slow speed.
I thought you were going to say, are you in uniform or anything like that?
No, we're not.
You haven't even got a tunic on. Okay.
So as easy
So,
as possible.
so as long as you're not crippled in some way, you can keep fighting fires for the UK fire service.
It's so it is just a walking test, but the gradient gets around up. So I'm going to try and redeem ourselves in some way with that.
Just for perspective, you've done Ironman triathlon. How many triathlons have you done? Ironman triathlons.
I think 7 Ironmans.
7? You've done 7 Ironmans?
Over the years, yes,
Wow,
yeah.
That's amazing. Did you think that prepared you well for the walking?
For the walking aspect.
Is that your motivation
Yeah.
during the act for doing all these Ironman?
I better push it here, yes, yeah. So I realise that doesn't sound...
To be fair, the entry requirements to get in sound a little more thorough than your retesting.
Yes.
But I guess some level of retest is better than none.
And you're right. And I think, again, to try and redeem ourselves and to try and sort of portray a certain maintenance of fitness, I think day to day, really, in a watch environment, our fitness is certainly not monitored, what's the word?
They'd call you out if they thought you weren't
yes.
capable. Yeah.
If, for example, you and I went to an incident at a high-rise incident, for example, where that, again, is a very demanding incident for us in terms of taking a lot of heavy equipment up. Here in Chester, for example,
you're not allowed to take the lift when there's a fire, right?
No. So that is a really demanding
So if you
part.
saw someone slipping, you might have to...
Yes, then
intervene.
they'd be encouraged, to work on it.
But that might answer this question actually, but what's the most physically demanding part of your like day-to-day job? Like, is there one like thing that you think, I don't know, lifting the hose, or like you said, carrying things upstairs? What would you say there's?
To be honest, I probably would say it's high-rise incidents, because by the very nature of them, there's a lot of specific equipment to take, and it's all very heavy equipment, and there's nothing really we can try and slimline for it. And just high-rise, so going up the stairs, as you rightly say, we can't take the lift in that emergency situation, so it comes down to almost very old-fashioned, having a big kit bag which we fill with all our specific high-rise firefighting equipment, and between the two of us, you and I as the fire crew, we just manhandle it as quickly and as best we can up the flights of stairs.
No, that would be. I can imagine that being pretty tough. And then I imagine the building's sometimes on fire as well.
Yes.
Or there's a fire. I guess there's a fire in the building on one of the floors.
Yes. Yeah. So hopefully, modern building construction now, hopefully any fire within a building can be contained in a room.
I'm imagining Grenfell fire, which is running up the stairs in the middle. Yeah.
But you'd be right actually, and I almost mentioned Grenfell myself in that example, but exactly that situation really. I think there's so much progress has been made in terms of, for example, you and I sitting here now with brilliant state-of-the-art microphones on. So our communication systems have improved massively. Our fire kit's improved massively in terms of being breathable but resistant to extreme temperatures. Yeah. But there's a lot that still does come back to old-fashioned, just lugging heavy equipment around as quick as we can, and as safely as we can, really.
Like you said, the fitness tests did sound like they tested that aspect of the job as well, so pretty specific.
Well, I think so, and I think a lot of improvements have been made in the last 5-10 years, because I think there certainly was a time, and we've probably all heard through friends and family that I think there was a time that the police fitness tests, they had what I felt was a very low standard of, it was really the bleep test, but you didn't have to break into a run.
I think you had to do level 4.
Yes,
I've heard that. Is that right?
Yes, exactly.
Which,
that, yes,
if you've done the bleep test in PE, level 4 was when people, just sat down because they didn't want to sweat in their PE kit.
Absolutely, yes, yeah, exactly that. And I think, like a lot of things, really, I think we have moved on from that. That we have realised, well, actually, that doesn't reflect that, you might be in your first week of firefighting and the bells go down, and, if you are required to really put in a maximal effort, if suddenly you're not able to do that, then, it's a massive failing, not particularly of that individual, but really of that they even got to that.
Yeah,
they were allowed to get to that place in the first.
What do you do yourself? I know some of what you do, but tell us what you do to stay in shape for the job and in life outside of work.
For the job specifically, I really do try and focus, and perhaps I should focus a little bit more, but on strength training, being strong for the job. Yeah. Because just naturally, and very specifically to me, I know that's never really been my strength, if you'll pardon, it's never been my forte. I've come from a aerobic endurance background, really. I've naturally always loved my running, my cycling, swimming. Perhaps in the last 10 years or so, I've got more into my swimming. So the strength aspect of the job is something I've really worked on in the last 10 years or so, and through your good helping at classes at Synergy, and I really look at that now as a key part of my fitness. But my natural fitness, my natural strengths, really, I think have always been endurance. And to that end, really, within my fire crew, we try and utilise our strengths and weaknesses well. So I might not necessarily be your first choice to kick a door in. I might not have that explosive strength, but I will be your first choice to run with a standpipe, key and bar, for example, and a couple of lengths of hose, if the nearest hydrant that we need for our water supply is a quarter of a mile away to run there and back.
So you're like a mini Avengers team of doing the job that suits the individuals.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that is us at our absolute best. The same as you would pick any American football team or any team sport based scenario. There'll be, everyone's with their own strengths and weaknesses. So the speedy people you might put on the wing, or
I've never thought about that with the fire service, but that's interesting. I was actually going to ask you, but that might have answered this, that you might not always be the natural choice, although I'm sure you could. Have you ever carried someone? Have you ever carried like a child out of a building or anything like that? Have you ever had to?
Yes, I have. Yes, and again, it comes down to real teamwork and using each other's strengths and weaknesses. So to carry a casualty out of a building, it's intense in every way. Psychologically, it's intense, but the absolute main priority is getting that casualty out to a place of safety. So we do really use I think we naturally use our strengths and weaknesses there. So I might, for example, take the feet, which are naturally lighter than. So
would you carry them in pairs usually?
If we can, if we've got that luxury almost to be able to carry them in pairs. But also a stretcher makes it massively easier, and it's much, much better for the casualty as well. But even things like thinking if we're in a smoky environment, to carry a stretcher at waist height, it might be much better for the casualty to carry them at floor level where the smoke is less. We might be crawling as well, so we can see. Hard
on the back.
Yes, so again, it's hard all round. It's so much sort of in that rescue scenario. It's such a sort of a open, moving environment, really, that for example, it might be better for my bigger, stronger partner, for example, if they are that person, to take more of the weight, and it might be better for me to clear the way out, to move a sofa, to prop open a door, so when we get there we can go straight out. It's a real dynamic environment, I think.
Do you ever have you ever had to carry someone solo on your own, like over your shoulder? I mean, there's a classic sort of childhood idea of like the fireman's carriers having someone, you know, over your shoulder, running them on your shoulder. Is that anything you've had to do? Is that something happens, or do you usually have just more people around than that?
Luckily, it's something I've never done, but we are always told or encouraged to think about in reference to our fitness, really. We have to be fit or expect to be able to rescue our partner. So in a fire situation, we would always go into a fire compartment in twos, and it's for exactly that. Before we rescue anyone else, we have to be able to rescue each other.
That standard of strength is actually quite high.
Yes.
For you to have to rescue just anyone, like usually a male will just be heavier in general.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, yeah.
You know, I'm 82 kilos. I'd consider myself like moderately light, but 82 kilos, that's a lot to pick up and get out. So
it really is.
That is a big demand.
And very standard-wise, we think of an average person, we categorise them across the board, and we sort of round up, as it were, rather than round down. We think 100 kilograms, that's our standard casualty. So it's a massive demand, and when you take into account heat stress, the demands of getting to a place, able to be in a position to rescue them in the first place, they might be up 12 flights of stairs in a standard high-rise. But it's a real, I think, factor for us to think, well, can I rescue my partner, my body, my friend, who I have, you know, sat next to on the fire engine getting here. So we want to sit next to each other on the fire engine.
Sounds like, that's a good motivation for like keeping yourself in shape, really. Is like, is a life or death like scenario. It's not like, am I going to come second or first in this race? It's like, can I actually pick someone up and carry them out?
Yes. Yeah. And to that end, it might be messy in terms of the classic fireman's lift that we all think about. That's brilliant. That's best case scenario almost. But in real terms, and you know me from me taking part in your great classes over the years, you know that I would not be able to lift and put over my shoulder a 100 kilogram person, but I might be able to, if it was a life and death situation, I might be able to drag them roughly and uncomfortably along the floor to an open doorway where there's safe, clean, fresh air.
I think you could do that. I think you could, under the arms, sort of walking backwards, dragging them. Yeah, I feel like, I can imagine you doing that for sure.
And I think, again, perhaps what we shouldn't rely on, but what does happen is that massive adrenaline rush that we are in, that we are all in. Really, as soon as that 999 call comes in, as soon as our bells go down, as soon as we get that call, I think you can feel already, as you'd imagine, you know, we're
you get a little bit extra.
Yes.
30% extra strength.
Well, I imagine something.
I think that comes from, in my opinion, so when we're working out in the gym, let's say we're doing a 1 rep max deadlift, even when you're trying 100% to lift the weight and recruit all your muscles, you can only stimulate, let's say, 85% of your muscle, even if you're trying 100%. But I think with the extra adrenaline spike, your ability to recruit a higher percentage of your motor units like goes up, and that's, I think, where the phenomenon comes from of, like, you know, hearing people lifting cars is really they're just right at their max. You know, 99.9% of their muscle fibers involved recruited. So, I guess that's what the smelling salts they're trying to get. You know, trying to get people in that fight or flight response before a lift. But,
that makes real sense, and I imagine, you know, you feel it from playing competitive sports over the years, that the difference between a training session and a big key match. You know, it is.
Yeah, I run slow when I'm in training and we race. I'm so slow. I just
Really?
Yeah. When I play American football, we do like sprints down, and I feel like I'm trying as hard as I can, but I'd always be like fifth. But then when I'm on the pitch and if someone's chasing me, I feel like I can outrun anyone that's chasing me. I've never been caught from behind whilst running away from someone. So it's that fight or flight, you know, just get up and go. How do you balance shift work and living a healthy lifestyle? So I actually, being a firefighter was my like second choice career after being a personal trainer. It's something I would have always loved, and I've always said, if it doesn't work out, I'll try for the fire service. Although that's not a given because it's quite hard to get into, but it's always something I would have liked to try. And someone said you can do like TA fire service. Is that right? So, or a version of like part-time?
Yes, really. Yes, yeah, part-time. It's called on-call firefighting. And it's in, again, going back to the rural aspect, it's in much more rural communities.
Okay.
So here in Cheshire, for example, Tarpley have an on-call firefighting crew.
Are they generally local to Tarpley, or are they just anywhere?
Yes, because the whole way that on-call system works is you have to be within a 5-minute radius. So we could be chatting now, we could be having a coffee, we could be having lunch. If your bleeper goes off, you have to be able to respond to the fire station within 5 minutes. So
well, that puts that one out for me, but my point really is that actually one of the things that put me off was the nature of the shift work, because I just know how hard it is on people, like physically, doing shift work. Traditionally, the people I've found hardest to personal train and get into a healthy routine are shift workers. How do you manage that? Because you seem to be in good health and stay in good health.
I think certainly as I've got older, I've become really aware of how the shift work and how differing hours really impacts my every aspect of my well-being, really. It's something I always think about. I notice if I've had a really busy night shift, I always feel very cold the next day, or sort of the morning I finish, I feel like I can't get warm anymore, and I feel that really shows the proper physiological aspect of just being tired, for example, plays. I notice my mentality. You referencing American football, you know, how you run differently in training compared to a match scenario. I feel I can't push myself quite as much. If I came to one of your functional fitness classes this morning, for example, when I've had a night in bed, I've had a proper sort of normal standard tea time meal, I feel very different from if I have finished nights that morning and I've had perhaps half an hour between.
So will you nap, or have you got any strategies to cope with the shift work, or?
I've learned, I think, over the years that sleep is much more important, so to nap when I can. And again, we're all different, aren't we? I know that I can nap quite well, really, as it were. So if I had an hour where I thought, well, if I have a nap now, then I will be able to function better at your class later. And I know for some people that doesn't work, but...
Is that your ideal length for you, an hour? Is that how long you'll nap? What have you found works best?
Yes, it is really. I think an hour. I think if I've had a really busy, full-on, and not just been up all through the night, but having to work physically very hard, I would perhaps have a maximum of 3 hours.
Okay, so you can do quite a long...
Yes, really, yes, yeah. I did read somewhere that, sort of just being fairly interested in keeping myself as fit and healthy as I can, that, and you might be able to tell me otherwise, but I read somewhere that a 40-minute nap is often the best time scale to have. It's long enough for the good benefits to happen, but it's not too long for you to sort of feel groggy and, you know, for example, if we have a night in bed, any of us, and we get up in the middle of the night, you know, we might feel groggy and slow to wake up. Or,
I've heard 40 minutes is the ideal time. It's something to do with your sleep cycles. Maybe you complete one full cycle but don't go into the next one. I'm not sure what it is. I personally can't nap at all. It does
Can you not?
No, I just can't fall asleep. I can't sleep on a plane, can't sleep on a car.
Right.
So, yeah, it doesn't work for me, but I've heard 40 minutes. It'd take me 40 minutes to
Would
go to
it?
sleep, probably.
Oh, okay.
If at all. So.
Oh, that's right. Because I do think, I think, again, sleep, I think, is something I feel, perhaps in even the last couple of years, I feel much more aware of, because I think it's something I have wrongly, really, personally, got out of the habit of napping when I'm on night shifts. And I think, sort of coupled with, as we all are getting older, it's something I know that I've got the balance wrong with. So I'm currently really working on getting better nap times. But I think, yes, 40 minutes does sound good. Does sound a...
Well, if you need the 3 hours, I guess you need the 3 hours. So, yeah, you can catch up a bit on sleep. You know, 40 minutes, if you're absolutely exhausted, might not be enough. So
Yes.
It's not a one-size-fits-all. I've got one final question, and it's, how do you approach looking after your mental and like emotional well-being with what I describe as a fairly extreme job and seeing and experiencing extreme situations?
Again, I think that's something that has become much more acceptable almost at work to talk about. And I think brilliantly in day-to-day living now, we're all much more aware of mental health in general and looking after ourselves. And certainly we do see some tough situations. And I think it's much more... We are much more encouraged now to speak about it together as a fire crew, together as a watch.
Is the preset times for you to do that? Let's say if you went to like a fairly intense incident, will the fire service arrange for you as a group to come together and discuss that, or is that just something you arrange amongst yourselves?
There is opportunity for sort of a formal debrief, really. So, and we always debrief our certainly our more serious incidents, but sort of there's a very formal process that a senior officer can go through by saying, I would like this particular fire crew, they've had a really traumatic RTC, for example. I'd like them to have a formal talking to almost by a mental health advisor.
Okay. Will they come into the station?
Yes, they do. Yeah. Yes. But I've always found when we have that, I've always found it's always very helpful. But I think, as you'd expect, really, I think we talk amongst ourselves, really, and I personally feel very lucky with having a great network of friends that allow me to talk about it if I want, or even not talk about it if I want, but I feel really reassured that they know I've had a very hard-hitting incident or so. So I do feel very well supported, and I feel very comforted almost in that situation, knowing that I do have that network around me of friends. I have a great... I think we do have a good relationship at work where we can say to each other, actually, I was really scared at that incident, or did we give that person enough respect there at that particular stage of that rescue, for example? Or I think we are all nowadays really good at saying how we felt at that time, or also I've noticed brilliantly in the last probably 5-10 years of being a firefighter, able to come in the next day, the next week, even the next month or so, and sit around the brew table where all our informal chats take place. If you imagine sort of a family sitting around the tea table or so, and I think we are really open and welcoming to someone saying, gosh, you know, I can't shake thinking about that particular fatal incident or so, and I think we're all brilliantly supportive and really respectful of how it does impact, and I find that so reassuring.
Sounds like you've got a really good culture going, at least within the fire service experience you've had. So that's positive, yeah.
Yeah, I really think it is, and I think really with each passing year, that aspect gets better, and I say that with all the respect to the formal aspect of me saying, yes, our principal officers will be able to contact our sort of key mental health advisor, and that structure is all brilliantly in place, but I think each and every one of us just is so thankful and grateful sort of that we've got that much more informal, casual, gosh, you know, I'm struggling thinking about that incident, and that, yeah, I think that's brilliant.
Great. Well, thanks for coming and doing this. It's been interesting. I had a lot of questions I wanted to ask, so it was an easy one for me because I was just curious, and thanks for everything you do. Although joke around, but actually when you think about what you're actually doing, it is intense, and I forget that, I think, when I see you smiling, that actually the things you deal with, although you come and smile and you say hello and you're happy, actually, you know, I would find that very hard. So you do very well to always project a positive outlook, and thanks for everything you do. Thanks for joining me. Here's the full playlist of all my full-length episodes, and here's another one that you might like. Hit the thumbs up button, make sure you're subscribed, and see you again soon for another episode.